After the first helicopters were developed for military use during the Second World War, it quickly became obvious that bigger, more powerful models were required to successfully fit the roles needed by the military. The model we will look at in this video appeared at the end of World War II, and in the coming years proved its worth in rescue and observation roles, used by both the US Army and Navy, and later participated in the Korean War as well. This was the Sikorsky R-5 helicopter, so let's see the history of this aircraft today. There were numerous experiments with helicopters since the beginning of the 20th century, but the first actually usable ones only appeared in the late 1930s. As technology advanced, several military models were developed during World War II for various roles on both sides, like the Fokker-Gehlis FA-223 and the Flettner FL-2A2 Colibri in Germany, or the Platt-Lepage XR-1 in the United States. I have already made videos covering these types, so if you're interested in their history, check them out. But the most successful was without any doubt the first single-engine, single-rotor design, which became the first mass-produced helicopter of the world, created by the designer everyone knows by now, Igor Sikorsky. His first successful helicopter design, the VS-300, made its maiden flight in September 1939 with the designer at the controls. It was the first helicopter to use a single engine to power both the main rotor and the anti-torque one on the tail. In May 1940, he presented a new design, then called VS-316, to the Army, and in January 1941 a contract was signed for the development. This helicopter made its maiden flight in January 1942, and after further testing conducted at Wright Field, the Army officially accepted the type as XR-4 at the end of May, and in December they ordered 15 YR-4A models for service trials. In the next year, after several demonstration flights, a contract was signed for 100 production R-4 helicopters. Though this model entered service during World War II and was used for various roles, it was in many aspects a very rudimentary helicopter, using a single 200 horsepower engine, and because of that, its lifting capacity and military use were both very limited. But by the time the R-4 design entered service, Sikorsky was already working on a new model, which was aimed to have more lifting capacity, range and speed than its predecessor. The work on this new model, though it started as a private venture at the end of 1941, received a big boost when the British Air Commission, impressed by the R-4 model's performance, placed an order for 2 large helicopters in spring 1942, mainly thinking about the possibility of operating helicopters from their ships that could carry bombs against the German submarines. The US Army also found the idea of a bigger, faster helicopter interesting, and a month after the British, they also requested a new design from Sikorsky, asking for a new helicopter with a useful load capacity of 1,100 pounds. The request stated, "It is urgently desired to develop a helicopter with greater useful load, endurance, speed and service ceiling, which could have greater utility than the XR-4. Sikorsky's new S-48 model was a completely new design, a much bigger helicopter than the R-4, and it fit both requirements. It was almost 10 feet longer, its rotor diameter was about 10 feet bigger, and it used a 450 horsepower Pratt & Whitney engine instead of the small 200 horsepower unit used on the R-4 model. But the engine choice and the lack of strategic materials actually slowed down the development of the new helicopter substantially, as at first many parts of the frame had to be built from wood. The Army Air Force prioritized aluminum and other materials for their conventional planes. The use of the Pratt & Whitney engine was also problematic, as to simplify the installation, Sikorsky kept the original engine mounts used on the Vought Kingfisher float planes. But later the mounts had to be redesigned to allow the installation of a bigger fan to cool the engine. The airframe on the new model was more streamlined than on its predecessor, and the seats were installed in tandem rather than side by side. The first models still featured the tail wheel from the R-4 design, which was meant to prevent damage to the tail during landing and takeoff, but on later production models it was deleted. The first model of the new design, now designated XR-5, was finished summer 1943 and made its maiden flight in August. The test flights continued in the following months with many small modifications made to the helicopter, which in September demonstrated its lifting capacity by hovering with the pilot and observer on board and 8 other men on each landing gear, exceeding the required lifting capacity by about 600 pounds. In October, however, following a mechanical failure, the first prototype crashed, but luckily no one was seriously hurt in the incident, and a month later testing continued with the second prototype. The Army Air Force, even before the testing started, already authorized a contract for 250 production units, which was soon increased by another 150 units, plus an additional 50 for the Navy. The last XR-5 model started flying in January 1944, and after the Army Air Force accepted this model, it was moved to Wright Field in September. This model finished the Army acceptance trials by March 1945, and after that, the R-5A models were cleared for mass production. The first models soon started to enter service, but almost immediately some teething problems were revealed with the rotor blades and other components. Sikorsky had to implement temporary fixes to the already delivered units, while the rest of the order was still in production. But the end of World War II soon arrived, and with only 60 models finished from the new helicopter and only 9 delivered, the Army cancelled the contract. After losing the military orders, Sikorsky started to refine his design and adapt it to civilian use, which as it happened turned around the luck of his design, and after some interesting events, reignited the military's interest as well. But more about that when we get to the service history of the type. The Sikorsky R-5 was 57 feet 1 inches long, 13 feet tall, and used a main rotor with a diameter of 48 feet. It had an empty weight of 3,780 pounds and a maximum takeoff weight of 4,825 pounds. The helicopter was powered by a Pratt & Whitney air-cooled radial engine, producing 450 horsepower. With this engine, the R-5 could reach a top speed of 106 miles an hour, had a range of 360 miles, and a service ceiling of 14,400 feet. The XR-5 was the original prototype. The WWII models were the pre-production variants built for service trials with minor modifications. The R-5A was the early production model, which could carry 2 stretchers on the sides. Notice the early style landing gear. The R-5D, later renamed H-5D, was a modified variant now featuring a nose wheel as well. The H-5G was an updated version built with a new type of landing gear and a wider cabin with 4 seats. The H-5H model was similar to the G model, but had a combined landing gear with floating pontoons. The first Navy variant was the H-02S1, which was similar to the YR-5A models and was used for service trials by the Navy. The H-03S1 was the Navy variant of the upgraded 4-seat model. And the H-03S1G was a Coast Guard variant, and some of them featured a special landing gear, which could deploy floats. And finally, the S-51 was the designation of the civilian version. The Sikorsky R-5 was accepted into service only a short time before the end of World War II, and the few helicopters delivered never reached operational units. After WE Day, the interest in the new helicopters, and for any newly developed military vehicles for that matter, faded away quickly. So as we mentioned earlier, Sikorsky adapted his design to the civilian market. But in November 1945, one of these helicopters participated in a dramatic rescue mission, saving 2 men from a barge in stormy weather, an event that renewed the interest of the military officials. And the R-5 was put into service, and when the Korean War started, several different models of the Sikorsky helicopter participated in the conflict. The H-5 and its Navy counterpart, the H-03S1, flew hundreds and hundreds of Medevac missions, saving countless lives. The type proved to be resilient to damage and nimble enough to avoid enemy fighter planes. But it had its problems too. It had a narrow center of gravity range, and because of that, they usually carried iron weights with them, which were placed forward or further back depending on the load to balance the helicopter. The arrival of new more advanced models like the Bell H-13 or the Piasecki H-25 put an early end to the H-5 service in the US military, and the type was retired in 1957. Sikorsky tried to modernize the H-5, but his updated XHJS-1 lost out to the earlier mentioned Piasecki design. The model was also licensed by the British Westland Company in 1947, and 133 units were built for the Royal Navy and Air Force between 1949 and 1954. The Sikorsky R-5 was also used by many other countries, including Australia, Argentina, Canada, France, the Netherlands, and more. and altogether more than 300 units were built. This helicopter, though it arrived too late for World War II, showed its capabilities in the Korean War, and was also used in many other countries around the world. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please leave a like, subscribe to my channel, and in the comments let me know if there's any interesting events or vehicles you'd like to see.